What's up, Taiwan? I'm Tiffany Wong with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. In a long-awaited decision, Taiwan will face a 20% tariff on most of its exports to the United States, following a new executive order issued by U.S. President Donald Trump. It comes just one day after Taiwan's cabinet said they had reached a consensus on a deal with the U.S. As Chris Gorin reports, the new tariff rate has created as many questions as it has answers.
Taiwan President Lai Ching-te addresses the nation from the presidential office, following a White House announcement of tariffs on most countries across the world, including Taiwan, which will see most of its exports levied at 20%, starting in 7 days.
我们最终的目标是既争取对登关税能够到合理，然后对台湾最有利，同时也争取232的关税对台湾的 ICT 产业还有电子零组件产业不至于造成冲击。
The 20% rate is a reduction of sorts from the 32% originally announced by the Trump administration in April. However, it's still more than several of Taiwan's neighboring countries, such as South Korea and Japan, a fact that's drawing criticism from Taiwan's opposition parties.
希望在连续的谈判过程当中，能够把28%的税率调降下来，不然台湾最大的竞争对手就是日本跟韩国。如果他们都是15%，台湾20%。 那未来我们如何要跟日本、韩国竞争？
The announcement comes after Taiwan's cabinet said it had reached a consensus on technical terms of a deal with the U.S. But Lai says both sides still need to have a final meeting before more details can be revealed. Another major concern for Taiwan is tariffs that can be levied under a law known as Section 232. Under the law, Taiwan's most valuable exports, such as semiconductors and servers, which have until now been exempt, could see sector-specific tariffs of an unknown amount.
It's a possibility in the sense that if you look at some of the tariff actions that the Trump administration has taken under Section 232 this time around, they've ranged as high as 50%, right? So that is the tariff rate that is applicable to steel and aluminum and now copper.
The U.S. Commerce Department investigation is expected to be completed within 2 weeks. Experts say if the tariffs are applied to Taiwan semiconductors, it could hurt not only Taiwanese companies, but also the booming AI industry in the U.S.
I think the impact could be very significant because essentially the tariff will be paid by the customer or the buyers in the U.S., right? So essentially it will undermine, I think, a lot of the investment in semiconductor and AI industry in U.S.
President Lai says Taiwan's goal is to make a deal as soon as possible so that the 20% tariff will be only temporary. But some here say it might not be so easy.
As Trump mentioned, the tariff is the most beautiful word is in the dictionary, and we will see the Section 232. We may also see other kind of the different form of the tariff, for example, the anti-dumping, the countervailing duty tariff, and so on. So we have to to face this kind of a challenge in the future. This is just the beginning.
The Trump administration has left open the opportunity for most countries to make deals to bring their tariffs down. If Taiwan's deal is as close as Lai says it is, perhaps Taiwan's chance isn't far away. Eason Chun and Chris Gorin for TaiwanPlus.
After the U.S. Trump administration announced it would place 20% tariffs on most Taiwanese goods, industries across Taiwan are reacting to the news, many expressing concern about how the tariffs would affect their businesses and livelihoods. Cadence Carranza reports.
Starting next week, most Taiwanese goods exported to the U.S. will be subject to a 20% tariff, a rate announced Thursday by the Trump administration that Taiwan President Lai Ching-te has been quick to call temporary, emphasizing that tariff negotiations would continue as the country seeks a lower rate. But the announcement is already raising concerns among many industries in Taiwan. Some fishers say they're afraid for their livelihoods, especially those selling swordfish, as around 70% of Taiwan's swordfish are exported to the U.S. and will be heavily impacted by tariffs. Taiwan's orchid industry may also take a hit, with around 40% of Taiwan's orchids exported to the U.S.
因为我们的利润没那么高，一节20%我们好像也是负担不起。基本上讲到后面，不管是哪一方是买方承担还是卖方承担，到后面也都是消费者，也是都会出问题。所以说，基本上我们还是希望政府可以帮我们说谈到更好的关税这样子。
Other industries also say they anticipate impacts on any goods that are imported from or exported to the U.S.
我想影响应该是相当的大了哦，就是说包含我们的啤酒，进口到美国铝罐的关税，那以及我们整个在海外所有的经销商，目前因为关税的问题，大家对于下订单都还是趋于保守。
Though others say they had already made preparations, which may limit the tariff's effects in the short term.
其实关税对我们在进口食材的这个部分呢，当然多多少少会有些影响。那么我们这边呢，因为之前是整个集团在做一个国际的整体的这个采购，所以其实在采购的这个协商这个优势上呢，我们都是预先就已经先签好了这个合约，所以短期之内呢，或者是在这个今年度，其实对我们的这个影响是比较小的。
Taiwan's opposition parties have also criticized the tariff rate, questioning how Taiwan will compete with neighboring competitors like Japan and South Korea, which both got lower tariff rates at 15%, and emphasizing that fluctuations in Taiwan's currency would mean an even higher burden on exporters. But Taiwan's ruling party, headed by President Lai, is emphasizing that the negotiations are not finished and that negotiators will work hard to achieve a better deal for Taiwan and for industries across the country. Andy Xue and Cadence Quaranta for TaiwanPlus.
A U.S. think tank recently wargamed a Chinese blockade of Taiwan. Its findings show that even limited military actions could kill thousands. Our reporter Alan Liu has the story.
Thousands die, the U.S. loses hundreds of aircraft, and Taiwan runs out of gas. These are the possible outcomes of a Chinese blockade of Taiwan in 2028. According to a wargame report by CSIS, a Washington-based think tank focused on geopolitical issues. A potential attack on Taiwan started to grab the world's attention back in 2022, when China reacted strongly to then House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visits to the country.
When we say blockade, people's natural thoughts turn to the shipping, which is an extremely important part of it in many of the scenarios. But at higher escalation levels, at higher risk tolerances, China could directly attack Taiwan and has probably tens of thousands of close-range ballistic missiles that it has built in order to do that.
In the simulations, Chinese President Xi Jinping orders the China Coast Guard and maritime militia to position themselves around Taiwan, attempting to stop shipping headed for the country. The action disrupts international trade and the world economy. Taiwan rejects China's legal arguments and decides to resist. The casualties could include thousands of deaths, and for the U.S., a loss of hundreds of aircraft and dozens of warships. This raises a question over whether the U.S. would be willing to intervene in a real blockade.
Blockade is covered under the Taiwan Relations Act, and yet there may be more reluctance. This may be a harder sell for the American public, or political leaders may be more reluctant to get involved in it if it is a blockade.
Without U.S. intervention, the report says Chinese submarines and sea mines would still manage to destroy 40% of ships trying to reach Taiwan, even with the maximum efforts by Taiwan's military and U.S. supply munitions. To make it worse, Taiwan would be at risk of running out of natural gas in 10 days, losing nearly half of its power-generating capacity. Taiwan would urgently need ships to run the blockade. Airlifts, submarines, and smaller boats, if they could make it past the Chinese lines, could only deliver a fraction of what Taiwan normally needs. However, a blockade doesn't necessarily give China an advantage.
For China, it requires expending a lot of military capabilities, especially at higher levels of escalation, for unclear gains.
For example, a blockade would also mean high casualties for China. In two wargame scenarios, conflicts peaked with U.S. strikes on China and Chinese missile attacks on Guam and Japan, and they end up with U.S. forces inflicting heavy damage on China. A blockade would also alert other nearby countries and cost China key military resources needed for a full-scale invasion of Taiwan.
The United States and its allies and partners need to prepare to counter and end the blockade. Most important among those steps is thinking about off-ramps to offer Beijing. Beijing can't feel like it's painted into a corner and that the only way out is continued escalation. Somehow this conflict needs to end, but without Taiwan making substantive concessions to China.
War games like these are effective tools to play out worst-case scenarios and find ways out of them. They form part of a defensive strategy that leaves no scenario unthinkable, so that military planners and civilian leaders in Taiwan and the U.S. can prepare for real-world possibilities and work towards better outcomes. Howard Chang and Ellen Liu for TaiwanPlus.
As an island nation, Taiwan's seas provide a bevy of delicacies. That's why seafood played a central role at this year's Taiwan Culinary exhibition. But where there's seafood, there are questions about sustainability. Leslie Liao reports.
Food, food, and more food. If you can eat it, you'll find it here. This is the Taiwan Culinary exhibition. It's a celebration of the country's treasured food culture. Taiwan takes its food so seriously that even the president attended the expo's opening ceremony.
3, 2, 1!
The Taiwan Visitors Association, which promotes local tourism, organized this exhibition. As the government continues trying to bring overseas visitor numbers back to pre-COVID levels, industry experts say that leveraging Taiwan's food scene should be a priority to meet that goal.
我们所做的每一个民调，就是你为什么会来台湾玩呢？每个人答案都是美食。韩国、日本、美国、菲律宾答案都一样，所以台湾的美食扬名全球。
The theme of this year's exhibit is seafood. Taiwan is an island country and known for its bountiful seas. But at a time when overfishing is a global concern, there's one question that pops up when talking about ocean delicacies. A point of focus at culinary expos like this is sustainability. How do we go about consuming and producing as much as we do without depleting the Earth's natural resources too quickly? There are dedicated speakers and exhibits on sustainability, and it's on the mind of many of the big players here.
我们的这个自助餐厅呢，它是特别的跟台东的这个渔船做契作，等于我们这个鱼呢，我们没有挑品种，就是它这个渔船捕到的鱼，我们全部都收，就不会因为说这个是不要的品种，那你可能就浪费了。所以我们这个非常积极的做到海洋的这个生态永续链。
Sustainability is about protecting the environment. Human-caused climate change can have severe consequences in Taiwan. That's especially true for smaller operations, like for this fish farmer from Pingtung in southern Taiwan who says they got lucky after dodging damage from recent torrential rains. Even so, environmental impacts are always back of mind.
天气太热的时候，我的鱼可能也会不吃饭，或者是雨下太大的时候，我的海水的盐度也会变淡。
And it's not just the seafood industry that's thinking about sustainable practices. Pingtung has an up-and-coming chocolate industry, and purveyors from there are thinking about how to protect their product's future.
国外因为是很多制造国家的展区，树的话没有办法就是顾好，它才有那个量少的一个风险。
In many ways, this expo is a feast. But instead of indulgent excess, this feast is mindful of its environmental impact. People here try to take only what they need and leave enough for the earth. Fu Huahong and Leslie Liao in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally, let's take a look at how Australian Indigenous artists are turning trash into art. I'm Tiffany Wong. Take care and see you next time.